Chapter 10 delves into humanity's spiritual struggles and the consequences of rejecting divine truth. It examines the allure of pagan beliefs, those centered on nature worship, polytheism, and reliance on human wisdom, and contrasts them with the transformative power of God's revealed truth. The chapter explores how turning away from God leads to spiritual blindness, moral decay, and a futile search for meaning outside of His divine plan. Through vivid examples and compelling arguments, the text emphasizes the dangers of idolatry and the human tendency to suppress God's truth in favor of self-made systems of belief. It serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of aligning one's heart and mind with the Creator rather than created things. The Angel and the Little Scroll. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. He was robed in a cloud, with a rainbow above his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs were like fiery pillars. 2. He was holding a little scroll, which lay open in his hand. He planted his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. 3. And he gave a loud shout like the roar of a lion. When he shouted, the voices of the 7 thunders spoke. 4. And when the 7 thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven say, "Seal up what the 7 thunders have said and do not write it down." 5. Then the angel I had seen standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven. 6. And he swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heavens and all that is in them, the earth and all that is in it, and the sea and all that is in it, and said, "There will be no more delay." 7. But in the days when the 7th angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as He announced to His servants the prophets. 8. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more, "Go, take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." 9. So I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. He said to me, "Take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey." 10. I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. 11. Then I was told, "You must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings." False worship, a focus on created things rather than the Creator. Paganism often diverts reverence from God to nature or lesser deities. Moral deviation, pagan practices may represent a turning away from divine moral standards to cultural or personal preferences. Rejection of revelation, scriptures such as Romans 1 describe humanity's tendency to suppress the truth of God, embracing futile thinking. Paganism defined. Paganism historically refers to religious practices outside of monotheistic faiths, often involving nature worship, polytheism, or spiritual systems rooted in the material world. It frequently contrasts with the concept of God in Abrahamic religions, where God's truth is revealed as universal, transcendent, and exclusive. Rejection of God's truth. This is commonly described as turning away from divine revelation in favor of human or material creations, emphasizing earthly concerns over eternal ones. Scriptural examples include idolatry and disobedience to God's laws. Potential connections to Chapter 10. If the chapter describes idolatry, it could be tied to the idea of substituting God's truth with man-made beliefs, aligning with Old Testament condemnations of idol worship Isaiah 44 verses 9 to 20. If it addresses human pride or rebellion, it might relate to pagan tendencies to elevate human reasoning or false gods above divine authority, as illustrated in Romans 1 verses 18 to 25. If it speaks about misplaced hope or spiritual blindness, it could echo the rejection of God's truth in favor of rituals or philosophies that fail to acknowledge Him fully. In Revelation 10 verse 4, John hears 7 thunders utter their voices but is explicitly instructed by a voice from heaven not to write down what they said. There are several interpretations as to why this command was given. 1. Mystery of God's plan. The content of the 7 thunders may pertain to divine mysteries that are not meant to be revealed to humanity. This fits with the theme of Revelation, where God's ultimate purposes are partially unveiled, leaving room for trust in His sovereignty. 2. Incompleteness of Revelation. The book of Revelation is not intended to give a complete account of God's plans, but rather a symbolic and partial one. This withholding might underscore that some aspects of God's judgment or plan are beyond human comprehension or not yet meant for disclosure. 3. Testing of faith. By withholding this knowledge, God may be emphasizing the importance of faith. Believers are called to trust God's will without needing full disclosure of every detail. 4. Protection of humanity. Some interpreters suggest that the content of the seven thunders could have been too terrifying or overwhelming for humanity to handle, and thus it was sealed to prevent undue fear or despair. 5. Divine timing. The revelation of certain truths may have been reserved for a specific time in history. The withholding of the seven thunders could signify that their message is not relevant until a later point in God's plan. 6. Symbolic function. The command not to write could serve a literary or theological purpose, emphasizing that revelation is about what God chooses to reveal, not everything John experienced. This distinction might heighten the reader's focus on the revealed portions. The exact reason remains unknown, and this ambiguity contributes to the mystery and depth of the text, inviting readers to reflect on the boundaries of divine revelation and human understanding. Honey in biblical and symbolic contexts. Symbol of God's blessings and truth. In the Bible, honey often represents abundance, sweetness, and the goodness of God's provision. For example, the Promised Land is described as a land flowing with milk and honey, Exodus 3 verse 8, symbolizing divine blessings and prosperity. Honey can also signify the sweetness of God's word. Psalm 19 verse 10 compares God's commandments to honey, emphasizing their desirability and spiritual nourishment. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold, they are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. Pagan appropriation of honey. Pagan traditions also valued honey for its perceived sacred and magical properties. It was often used in rituals, offerings, and as a metaphor for nature's bounty, yet without acknowledgement of the Creator. In this context, honey could symbolize a misguided pursuit of sweetness and satisfaction outside of God's will, seeking fulfillment in creation rather than the Creator. Warnings against misuse. Honey can also serve as a cautionary metaphor when overindulged or used improperly. Proverbs 25 verse 16 warns, "If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit." This could parallel how paganism seeks to exploit God's good gifts, like nature or human reason, but ultimately leads to spiritual harm when detached from divine truth. If honey in chapter 10 symbolizes something greater. Pagan misinterpretation, honey, as a divine gift, could represent how paganism twists God's blessings into objects of worship. Instead of pointing to God's goodness, honey becomes a false god in itself. The sweetness of God's word versus pagan deception. God's truth is described as sweet and life-giving, while paganism might offer an initial sweetness that proves to be empty or even harmful. Idolatrous substitutes. The pursuit of honey-like satisfaction through idols or human-made systems ultimately rejects the true sweetness found in God's revealed word. Until next post, Shalom.